So, David, before the end of this afternoon, actually maybe before the end of this half hour, we're expecting Donald Trump, we are told, to be signing another executive order, this time apparently related to steel and aluminum tariffs, something he talked about on Air Force One yesterday, and Canada would be included in that. It's 25%. I know we've talked about tariffs with him before, but this is obviously a concern enough specifically for Quebec, where so much of our exports of aluminum are to the U.S., that apparently the Premier has decided to fly out to Washington to try to meet with him or negotiate with him?
Well, this is major for the Quebec economy. We generate over $11 billion annually in revenue from the aluminum sector. Thousands of jobs directly and indirectly depend on the 8 smelters. We actually have 8 aluminum smelters in Quebec. What's fascinating is that some of those smelters are actually owned by U.S. companies. I was following, last week when we were talking about the overall threat of tariffs, one thing that was guiding a lot of analysts' take on what Trump was going to do was how the markets reacted. So at the close at 4:30 today, the entire steel and aluminum sector in the U.S. was up significantly. So the markets in the U.S. and these companies, the sector likes this. And so because one of the principal tenets, organizing tenets of MAGA is to revive or make believe that Trump will revive the industrial and manufacturing sectors in the United States. And so back in 2018, 2019, when there were tariffs on steel and aluminum imposed on Canada and the rest of the world, there was an uptick in investment in aluminum and steel in the U.S. So I think what Trump is trying to do here is try to get a lesser win than the one he was going for last week when the markets and the U.S. internally shut him down completely. And for here, it's nothing short of dramatic. And yes, okay, François Legault, as he should, we're going to work all the diplomatic channels we can with senators, with the White House, with congressmen and congresswomen. But at the end of the day, right now, Congress, the Republican Congress, is united behind Trump. I mean, we have yet to see any cracks like we saw early in 2017 and 2018. And so right now, what's going to be troubling is that we're ending a fiscal year, right? Our fiscal year ends March 31st, Aaron, as you know, and we're ending a year of record deficits here in Quebec. And right now, Éric Girard, our finance minister, is actually putting the final touches on next year's budget. And that means that to keep the aluminum sector, and the phone calls have been going left and right since yesterday and even before, most probably, because of the threat of overall tariffs. And depending on what happens with China, because the interesting question is going to be, will the 25% on aluminum and steel be tacked on to the 10 that Trump already put on China last week on everything? So that would make Quebec aluminum cheaper than China. Why is that important? 70% of all the aluminum produced in the world comes from China. So the idea here is what kind of aid package, can François Legault, of course, we'll hope for some help from Justin Trudeau and the Feds, but what kind of package are we looking at? It's going to cost a lot of money and probably a lot of much cheaper hydro, because, again, another important detail for people who might not know, to make aluminum, you need 2 things, bauxite and electricity. Those are the 2 keys. And so the idea here now is to make sure that we can stay competitive. And even if there are tariffs, that means we're going to have to shell out a lot of money to weather the storm. Hopefully, just like in 2018, 2019, there was a way to walk this back without too much hurt on our industry. But this is massive because directly and indirectly, aluminum, especially, of course, in the Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean region, but across Quebec, is one of our key strategic economic sectors.
So, David, I don't want to delve too much into the details, but with respect to this, right, I'm remembering back in the Biden presidency when U.S. Steel, Japan, Nippon Steel, wanted to buy U.S. Steel because it was having trouble. Biden nixed that deal. You're dealing with an American company, as you said. I did not know this. There are American companies operating steel companies even here. But if they could supply all their own needs, they wouldn't be buying from us in the first place. So do we have at least some leverage that way?
Some, but the idea is that the leverage here is inflation in the U.S. Obviously, tariffs, as we all know, and we talked about this at length over the last few weeks, inflation is ultimately the last weapon that will force companies and ultimately Donald Trump to maybe walk this back if this doesn't work. But already the markets, I'm following the markets today, they're saying, well, all of this is going to mean probably the Fed is going to reduce rates again very soon. So there's a lot at play here, not to delve in too much into the details, but at the end of the day, MAGA means this dream, this fantasy of turning the clocks back and the U.S. back from a service economy, which it is today, to a manufacturing and industrial economy. And let's remember, politically speaking, Donald Trump is president today because basically 3-4 states, right? Obviously Ohio, but Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. And where would those steel and aluminum plants mainly be? In those key states. So right now, politically speaking, I think Trump is going for a short-term win. And yes, the U.S. will still need steel and aluminum from outside, just like we were talking about this. Even if it's the largest oil producer in the world, last week we were saying it still needs to import some oil and gas. And so all the arguments that we were talking about last week to justify not going forward with overhaul tariffs on everything apply here. But on this one, you get the sense that he's not walking this back. Hopefully there might be carve-outs, there might be delays. Maybe he'll say, in 6 months if I don't get A, B, C, D from Canada. But right now, it's all hands on deck, and we're going to need definitely an emergency aid package to help our economy weather this.
All right, let me, before I run out of time here, bring up, we're talking about, I understand now there's going to be a provincial or a Liberal leadership debate coming up 24th, 25th, one in English, one in French. I think everyone has kind of decided based on what we've seen of late that right now it seems like Mark Carney is the odds-on favorite to win. I'm not sort of saying something that's really up for debate right now. I think he is. But we had not heard a lot from Frank Baylis. He's a local guy. I had him on the show. Not that well known, perhaps around the rest of Canada. So he weighed in today on, of all things, the Palestine situation. What's going on here exactly?
Well, he wants to if he were to become leader of the federal Liberals, then automatically Prime Minister of Canada, which, as you said, is very, very unlikely, especially in the light of the latest poll that came out yesterday, the Palace poll, that shows that Mark Carney at the head of the Liberals, which would actually beat Poilievre head-to-head in a federal election, which is now confirming the growing trend that Mark Carney not only has right now a lock on the federal Liberal leadership race, but is actually turning the tide on Pierre Poilievre in Quebec, in Ontario, and in BC, and in certain other parts of the country which are key for the election. But Frank Baylis would, if he were to become Prime Minister of Canada, would basically move ahead of the rest of the international community and recognize Palestine as a country, which that would be very controversial, and that puts him out there, that gives him a headline. But let's face it, Aaron, with all due respect to Mr. Bayless, who was an MP, is one of the most successful businessmen in Canada. He made a fortune, and with all due respect, I mean, there's no shot right now. He's not even tracking anywhere in any kind of poll in terms of support to win the Liberal leadership.
Yeah, which is why I found it odd to have pick that as a way to get your name
I
back
think
in the
he's
news,
trying to just get his name in. He's there. Sometimes you just throw anything at the wall hoping it'll stick, and that's what him and his advisor tried to do today.
Gotta love politics. David Heurtel. David, thank you.